for our first session of the afternoon, Embracing AI as New Professionals, and we are doing this with a partnership with CILIPS SNPC, which is the Students and New Professional Community. I'm Manisha Menon. I am a student from Strathclyde University. I'm doing my Masters in Information and Library Studies. I'm also the chair for the SNPC community, as well as I was a placement student for CILIPS, and that's how I got this opportunity to do this panel. And as part, like I said, as part of my placement, I was tasked with creating a session for this conference catering to the new professionals, and I decided to go with AI, not because of a certain infamous conversational agent that was making its rounds on the internet, but because our lovely Andrew Cox, he had come to our university for a guest lecture, and immediately I realized that's what new professionals want to know. So one of the reasons which I decided to go with AI is I found that the primary focus of a librarian is to serve their community. And with every new technological advancement, librarians have found a way to incorporate them into helping their community grow. Today we'll be looking at how we embrace AI as librarians, and our panelists here are here to shed some light on the different queries and concerns we have about AI in our field. So I'll give it to the panelists now. Can we have a small round of introduction about yourself, your organization, and what AI means to you, as well as your relationship with AI? Let's start with you, Chris.
Hello. Seems to not really. Sorry about the squeak there. The distance make a difference. Is that better? Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm Chris Fleet. I'm map curator at the National Library. Yeah, you don't think? I don't think it's amplifying me, is it? I just shout loud. Can you hear me? Okay. Ah, okay. Thank you. Was that better? Yeah. So yeah, I work in the National Library of Scotland in the Map Library, and I've worked there for 30 years. It's been very interesting for me to attend this morning and listen to everyone saying libraries are all about people, which of course they are, but for me, my library experience is all about maps. And my main role has been connected to digital maps and putting them online, and obviously making the best of whatever technologies are available to us. And in the last 5 years, that has included various types of AI technology. But I would be the first to admit that for me, I'm not leading the way with these AI technologies at all. They're very much driven by external collaborations, in our case, by often people within the university sector who are really leading with the various code and machine learning that allows often features to be read on maps or text to be read on maps. And so that's the area that I do know a lot about, and a lot of that isn't that directly relevant to other areas of library work. But what I would say is that within the National Library of Scotland, there's been a lot of work connected to AI done in the last few years. And a few months ago, the library employed an intern called Lucy Dalgley. She did an environmental scan of AI across the library, looking at a very wide range of projects and the impacts and some of the main issues of that. Some of the issues that were very relevant to those projects. And that report, which I think is highly recommended, is on the National Library of Scotland's Data Foundry. And if you just Google Data Foundry NLS AI, you'll find her environmental scan. I think it's a very good kind of where we are now with AI within NLS. And also, a month and a half ago, the library organised a workshop on machine learning and AI in libraries for a day, where we had a range of speakers both from within libraries and outside of libraries, and niche projects as well as bigger impact projects, and as well as being a very interesting day. It was also all recorded and is available on YouTube as well. So I just wanted to mention those briefly. That's enough from me. Thank you.
Yeah, I was able to attend the session online, and you can find that at the analyst YouTube channel. You'll get the entire session over there. Now on to you, Andrew.
Is this? So I'm Andrew Cox from the Information School at the University of Sheffield. My main contribution, I suppose, in this area is a report I did a couple of years ago for CILIPS on the library perspective, really, on AI. There's a lot of material being generated about AI now. The funders are pouring millions of pounds into research on AI, but the library world's got to have its own response. So that report was a first go at doing that. I think things have changed. Generative AI, particularly ChatGPT, has changed probably what we think AI is. So we've got, the issues are very similar, the ethical issues that we should be asking about, the critical issues about who is empowered, who gains power from these systems. Those questions are still the same. But we think AI might look a bit different, and I think for the library world there's been a shift from maybe what we could call descriptive AI towards generative AI as a different type of challenge, but one that we are very much equal to, because it's all about, really about information literacy of users to really understand things like ChatGPT. What are they actually, how far can they trust the information there? Basically ChatGPT, well, it produces answers, but it doesn't give its sources. It doesn't, it's not citable, because it gives a different answer every time you ask it. So the information professional got a really important role there, I think, in helping users understand ethical ways to use tools like that. So,
Right, thanks, Andrew. Now on to Elisabeth, our SNPC Events and Comms Officer.
Yes, thank you, Manisha. So my name is Elisabeth Notch, and I am, as Manisha said, I'm the events coordinator for the Students and New Professionals community, and I also work as a public library assistant with Falkirk Libraries. So I don't have a lot to do with AI. However, what I have to do is deal with customers and patrons who come into the library, and during the chat they often mention AI more often than not, because they're all pretty scared of it. So as part of our, in public libraries, how we deal a lot with people who need computer help and help on the PCs, and we've got talking groups, we've got the Words for Wellbeing, we've got reading groups. So during these groups, the conversations tend to go towards AI more often lately. So what I try to do is tell customers a lot that it's actually not as scary as they envision it to be. They see the big headlines of, oh, AI might take over, extinction is near. But I keep telling them it could also be, the smart predictive text that you've sent. You can't hit the keys, right? But your phone knows what's meant to say. So I'm trying to bring them back onto the ground. So I'm more on maybe on the front line, maybe more on the day-to-day perspective of things.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Elisabeth. Now to Deborah.
Hello. Hi, my name's Deborah Ferns. I'm Copyright and Licensing Compliance Manager at University of Strathclyde. And really I'm giving a kind of copyright perspective and on AI, and looking at it from the perspective of the kind of queries that an academic library might have about things like GPT, so ChatGPT. So it's really questions about originality and ownership of the outputs of AI, or something I'm kind of looking at the literature that's out there about these kind of developing areas, and looking at how a university might address the concerns about students using ChatGPT, looking at how they might amend their policies on plagiarism to tackle that and look at referencing and how you acknowledge kind of the outputs you've generated using ChatGPT, how you might reference those, and how also looking at kind of publishers' policies and to what extent will they accept submissions generated in that way. So really just looking at the emerging issues as far as copyright is concerned.
All right, thank you so much for all of you for joining this, joining my panel. And I'll just get started with the questions. So firstly, I want to ask which services that libraries offer could be improved with the involvement of AI and which cannot survive without the human element. And out of the top of my head, I can just think of like cataloging or digital preservation. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think in everyone's minds, everyone's aware of the dangers of AI and AI replacing jobs. And I think there are digital services in every institution that can be done more simply and more efficiently and therefore seem vulnerable to replacement by machines. But whether that means job cuts in libraries depends really on the institutional context and the way that it's managed. And I think that there's a lot of people who are already aware in libraries of this shift that libraries have always been part of, responding to technology and taking advantages of technology, and provided people can be moved into related areas of work, I think that there's scope for doing a lot more than our libraries do now, and far less need to feel threatened by the idea of AI replacing jobs. And the areas that I see that AI is able to work on now are actually enabling libraries and library services to do a lot more than they had done in the past, particularly with regards to the interrogation of information. And the more that libraries have available in a digital form, whether it's text or images, the more that content can be interrogated in ever more intelligent ways and allow people to unlock really useful information. And I see that very directly in the world of mapping, where we have large quantities, hundreds of thousands of digitized maps that nobody could possibly look through and analyze in detail, but a machine can interrogate relatively swiftly and look at, for example, the distribution of different types of trees in Great Britain a century ago. It could look at very specific information relating to heights of the ground, relates to buildings, relates to the way that public facilities are organised, and all of that is really beyond the ability of previous researchers. There's immense power there. And I think that that kind of technology translated into resource discovery has a lot of advantages too, in being able to do a lot more than our catalogues or information retrieval can do now. I think the area I haven't really seen so much attention on yet, but is surely likely to happen, is the application of AI to user services in terms of inquiries and inquiry services, so that services that are now perhaps very manual or very personal could be facilitated and improved by machines in various ways. But maybe one of the final things I would say on the question is that I think everyone's aware of how novel some aspects of AI are, particularly with things like ChatGPT, but aspects of AI technology have been with us for a very long time and have been employed in a lot of areas already, whether people are aware of it or not. And I think that those kind of underlying technologies that could help with all aspects of organising a library, whether it's things like marketing, whether it's managing in terms of strategy, or even in terms of sort of behind-the-scenes processing activities, it will be able to hopefully assist with those in a way that makes them better than they are now.
Absolutely, I completely agree with that. And also when you mentioned the how the inquiry section of the library will be replaced, I mean, there's a scope of replacement. That means there's a chance for librarians to focus on other activities too. because once one of their one of the main services will be looked after by AI, you'll always have other community-led projects that they can work on side by side. So I completely agree with that. And what about Andrew? What do you think?
So I think it's useful to differentiate like descriptive AI, which is what we would have thought of until recently was going to be the key thing in libraries, because it's doing what Chris says, allowing you to search through lots of features of huge amounts of text or images or sound files or video files. That kind of descriptive AI, that would seem to be very relevant to making library collections much more accessible and allowing people to search in different types of ways. And then generative AI, the second type of AI, which has come to the fore with ChatGPT, seems to be slightly different. It's more about creating content than describing content. And I think where that is going, I think what I would point people to is what Microsoft are planning, what they call Copilot, which is a application of ChatGPT to Microsoft Office. So it means it can do clever things like take your Word report and turn it into a presentation very easily. Or it can summarize a meeting, or it claims to be able to do it. Or it can do an analysis of some quantitative data and give an explanation of that analysis. And what I think Microsoft are imagining, because they've written a report about fixing work, what their target is to make people more productive, in inverted commas, in office work in general, or what you might call knowledge work. So everything we do, like receiving emails, writing reports, doing analysis, lots of things that librarians do, but nearly every profession does. Microsoft are targeting that. They're trying to offer enhanced ways to use Microsoft Office. And I think the predictions are that that is going to have a big impact on productivity. Now, that could mean, well, we can do our jobs better and quicker, or it could mean there are fewer of us doing the same job. I don't think that's targeted particularly at libraries, for sure. They're targeting the whole of everybody who does office work. That's their aim, to have an impact on that. And that will have a disruptive effect on workplaces, that's for sure. The IMF said it in reports in the Financial Times today, that it will have a disruptive effect on employment. But I don't think it'll affect librarians so much, because although we do a lot of office work, we're more specialist, we're working in very specific areas, doing particular tasks. And these tools are not going to be optimized for those tasks. They will be optimized for, an accountant or marketing, things that almost every company does. So I feel relatively optimistic. And also the other side of generative AI is that obviously it's producing plausible untruths, things that can't be cited, things that when you ask the same question again, it gives a different answer. There's an intense need for users to understand that, though easy, there's a lot of problems here. And that's really the task that we've always had with information literacy, is to make people critically aware of all the issues around the services they might be tempted to use because they're easy to use.
And Elisabeth, your opinion from the public library point of view?
Yes, so from my point of view, you were talking earlier about how it could replace the inquiry service. But I think just listening to the inspiration earlier and the keynote at the start, I think that would be really, really, that would have an incredible negative impact on public libraries, because it's those small interactions, just asking for a book, and then that leads to a chat about the author, that leads to a chat about an author visit. These kind of interactions are what people would then miss. So I can see it work maybe in an academic context, but in a public libraries where I think it would take away a lot of the personal interaction that people crave, especially with a lot of customers, elderly customers saying, oh, I hate talking to a machine only when it's about phoning up council services and, you know, having to say, oh, press 1 if you want to go there, press 2 when you go there. That's already something that customers say, I hate that. And if we were to replace that, I think that would have a really negative impact on communities. However, also the descriptive AI that you talked about, I would love to have that in library systems a lot more. Because I'm not from Scotland, so I'm really struggling with spelling people's names, I have to say it. So when I have to find an author, the first thing that I do is, I hate to admit it, I go into Google and Google it, because Google has an AI search bar. So I can Google it and Google tells me this is how it's meant to be spelled, and then I put it into the library system. And I think it should be integrated into the library system, and I would love to have recommendations in the library system saying like, oh, if your borrower love to read that, they might like, you know, Angela Marsden's whatever. That would be incredible. So I would love to have more descriptive AI, but I'm not so sure about replacing human interventions when it comes to inquiry services.
Thanks, Elisabeth, and I think we would all agree with that, but because when it comes to human interaction, that's one of the key aspects of being a librarian. And up to you, Deborah, because we heard the public library point of view now from the academic library point of view. What do you think?
I think I would agree with the inquiry service about AI potentially losing that connectiveness. And I know how much students valued our library, particularly during COVID when it was the only place that was open that they could meet and they could speak to a librarian. And also I know, certainly with the generative AI, that it loses some of the context. So you could be asking an inquiry and that seems straightforward and you think, well, AI should be able to answer that, but they don't maybe understand the context that a librarian would understand, and it could take several iterations for the person to really get the answer that they're looking for when actually speaking to a person could give them that answer, plus could find out about all the other services that might be of help to a student or staff member that they maybe wouldn't get just by a machine answering their individual inquiry.
All right, thank you so much, Deborah. So moving on to the next question, and I think many of us, we have already discussed about that, the negative impacts of AI, that is, so one thing I want to ask, like, can incorporating AI again in public libraries do more harm than good amidst the funding crisis that's currently happening?
Well, I think there has to be a partial yes answer to that if they implement the technologies in the wrong way. And I think it's easy for us all to imagine we're kind of passive in the face of the onslaught of technology, but I think everyone is an active agent to some degree, and libraries are actually able to influence some aspects of the way these technologies are introduced within a library setting. And I think one of the distinctions between up in the world of big business with Microsoft and Google or Amazon is that they're completely profit-driven entities, and if there's a cheaper way of doing something that AI will allow, then logically, you know, thousands of people can easily be laid off. And libraries are not necessarily conditioned by quite the same constraints and can choose to implement technologies in a more sensitive and careful way, especially if they're more fully aware of the dangers of them. And I think, you know, all of the various writings that there are about AI and machine learning, including the report that Andrew was involved with, are so centrally focused on ethics and considering ethics to be at the heart, really, of what everyone should consider first before they are setting out in decisions connected to AI. What are the benefits of this technology? What are the constraints of it? And to different extents, I think, some of the dangers can be certainly reduced rather than eliminated. The other thing I would say, partly in response to the kind of dialogue around the previous question, is that whilst with automation and digitization of content, at one level it can take away that human element and the human elements of direct dialogue with people that is, of course, you know, what so many libraries thrive on and are very good at. But just because libraries can digitise content and can put it online and can reach far more people through it, doesn't mean to say that the human element goes. In practice, I think what I have found is that through reaching a much larger group of people online through digitisation, you can then organise events, whether they're online workshops or online talks, or even real kind of in-person conferences that are much more fulfilling, because you've reached a broader group of people who are able to, often the dialogue at the end of the event or some kind of interactivity, communicate. I think we reach far more people through our online maps than we ever used to when they were a simple physical collection. And that digital response in terms of telephone inquiries, written inquiries by email or through other media is not the same thing as meeting someone directly, but it is still real interaction, and it's often with people who would never have visited before because they're based a long way away. And applied to AI, I think that there is a flip side to it, that the more we become all conditioned to using AI, and AI being a central part of services, whether we're contacting a bank or an insurance company or building society or whatever, it actually increases everyone's respect and enjoyment of real interaction with people. And I think that's where libraries can continue to thrive and excel in that area. And there will be people who know they can go online and they know that they can employ the latest digital technologies, but they still do want to either see the real thing in terms of see the real artifact that the library has, whether it's a book or a manuscript or a collection, or they want to actually speak to someone directly, because that's a different experience and a much more valued one, I think, than the digital alternatives.
Absolutely. Andrew?
So maybe it's useful to point to two problems with what I call descriptive AI. I think there's a problem there of, as a profession, I think we decided to focus on people and teaching and those kind of areas. We're not a highly technical profession where we've got a lot of in-house resources to develop AI discovery systems, unfortunately. So we've got a trade-off between we can buy these systems, but they're very expensive, or we can train people to do that, but we don't really have the starting point for that. So I think there's definitely a problem there. We haven't got the money probably to buy the systems, and we haven't got the staff who can necessarily develop them open source. So I think there's a problem there. That's an issue for us. The other issue I think is about bias. So I think to give an example might be, suppose I had maybe someone deposits in the library collection 10,000 short interviews or videos of news items or something. AI could go through these and basically, like we do with a meeting, make some sort of rough transcription of what's being said, and then you can search that. It's going to be a lot better than just searching the titles of all these videos. Great. However, there's a systematic problem of bias, because probably those the AI tool is probably trained on the majority data. So it probably will understand English people speaking English better than it will understand people with a Dundee accent, say, or people speaking Gaelic. So it systematically favour the majority of what data is trained on. It's not really biased with AI, because you could imagine a world where everyone spoke Gaelic and all AI was trained on Gaelic, and it would understand things perfectly. But the reality is it's probably trained on the majority, which is English people speaking English. So that means exactly the kind of prioritisation that we've been trying to fight for in heritage, of like, let's hear unheard voices, let's hear local people, let's hear people speaking about their ordinary lives in their accent or in their own language. that's going to be harder to describe than the majority view. So we've got to take care to not just apply AI without thought, because it will recreate bias. And it's not really in the AI, it's in where those systems come from, because they've been trained really on, Google trains its AI on people chucking stuff on the internet. So it knows about cities, cars, the modern world, everyone is digitally connected in English. But does it know about, say, a horse and cart carrying coal in a photograph in our collection? No, it's going to struggle with that compared to identifying a cart. So I think the kind of voices we want to amplify in our heritage collections are actually going to be less visible if we're not careful with AI.
Right. Elisabeth, because clearly we are talking about the public library situation right now.
Yeah, I was also thinking to jump on the bias issue that you were talking about. You would have, as much as I said earlier, our recommendation system within a library system would be incredible. You would have the same issue of biases and books that are featured more on those, which would then probably create a cycle of people only reading the same things while new authors are being overlooked, and perhaps that would then create maybe an issue in the whole sector, as some publishing companies will not be really happy with that. Yeah, I think it was definitely also mentioned at the start that I mean, obviously everybody is kind of scared of being replaced by a machine. So I can't really comment on that, because I think a lot of other sectors might have more of an issue with that at the moment. If I think of graphic designers, perhaps, I think we can only hope and keep showing that our strength is people and that we will not be replaced. But yeah, I would probably think that the bias issue might actually be more of an issue that less people see coming.
And Deborah, actually, I'm going to give the next question to you, and then we'll bring it around. We have already touched upon the copyright concerns, and my next question is based on that. Amidst the copyright concerns stemming from students and academics using ChatGPT for their essays and even interviews, how can academic libraries and the wider sector help resolve this?
I think that really comes down to information literacy, having strong copyright and information literacy programs within libraries, and making students aware of the opportunities and constraints of the technology. So making them aware of the fact that ChatGPT, for example, won't necessarily be telling you the truth. It's telling you the information it's interpreted from the data that's been used to train it, but it's not necessarily telling you facts. So, interrogating that and seeing how reliable that source is, and looking at if it is giving a reference at all, are these real references? Is this a real journal? Has this author really created this article? One of the academics at Strathclyde actually did a blog post recently where he'd sort of searched himself using AI technology, and it came up with a report about who he was, and included universities he'd never worked at, included articles he'd never written. So it's really looking at that and saying, how reliable is this if you're going to be using that in your learning. And I think the other thing is universities deciding how, and certainly in assessment, to what extent are they going to be allowing any use of AI at all? Are they saying, no, you can't use these tools at all? Or is it a case of, well, you can use these tools provided you're referencing them? Sometimes they could be useful for students as a starting point with a question. Where do I go? We ask ChatGPT these questions to see what avenues we could go down for a research, but it's not the kind of end of your research, and not using it to produce your full essay. I imagine you're not going to you wouldn't search Wikipedia to get the entire answer for your essay, so why would you do this with ChatGPT? And it's really looking down that source. I mean, I've already heard of students at a school being suspended for using ChatGPT to produce their essays, and I suppose the other part of that is to what extent plagiarism detection tools like Turnitin can keep ahead of the technology and still identify where things have been plagiarised. But I think it's also, I mean, at the moment, I think the technology struggles with providing opinions and the type of analysis that would be expected in good university essays, but we don't know how far that will develop and be more difficult to detect.
Anyone else would like to? Andrew, I remember you had written a paper about the ethics associated with AI, the scenarios. So, yeah.
Well, to pick up on what's just been said, I mean, I think students have been using AI-based tools like Google Translate. I know a lot of our students are international students. They're using Google Translate, they're using Grammarly already. So what we have to do is, I think you're dead right, what we have to do is try and lay out, well, on what terms can you use it, when can you use it? Try and also encourage students to think about the wider issues, because I think ChatGPT as a whole has got a problem of the environmental impact of some of the power usage. So would students be put off using it if they knew that it wasn't sustainable? Or would they worry that it was actually partly developed in a kind of quite exploitative way? Would that worry them? So we've got to, and also the power of companies like Google and Microsoft, everybody's worried about that. Will people feel less likely to use these tools if they know that it's reinforcing those trends? So I suppose we have to encourage students to have a critical view of the tools.
And last question before I pass it on to the audience is, we have already seen how we can be responsible with AI, but let's move on to how sustainable AI looks like. How can we incorporate a new technology like AI in libraries without backtracking on all the efforts put into making them sustainable? Like we already have attended sessions about the Green Libraries initiative, and how do we go about with that when we are also including AI, because there's a lot of power consumption involved with incorporating AI. And what are your thoughts on that? And from the AI experts first.
I'm not sure I've got any great solutions to that, but I think widening the awareness of the issue, as Andrew has just said, I think is central to it, because I think the more that people are aware of that and are aware of the downsides of the technology and how it is very destructive of environmental resources, I think does condition, people's desire really to engage with it. It's not just an invisible impact that they can kind of not really see if people become aware of it, and I think that awareness could certainly grow a lot more.
All right. Okay. So, sorry, Andrew.
Well, I was just going to say, I suppose, of the three pillars of sustainability: social sustainability, the impact on equality. There's a big issue there around bias. So I think that, again, we have to keep people thinking about that.
All right. I think we have time for only one question from the audience. Anyone would like to ask?
Before a comment, I think just thank you very much. That was super interesting. Loads to think of. But I think just a comment about encouraging students to love learning as well, because if you use AI, you're not engaging in these materials, you're not getting to know them and discovering the amazing ideas and figuring things out for yourself as well. That's a pretty obvious thing to say, but we need to remind ourselves of that joy.
Thank you so much. And anyone else? All right, then that concludes our session for about AI. And once again, I'd like to thank our panelists. Thank you so much for joining for this session, as well as I'd like to thank our CILIPS staff, Sean, Kristen, and Leah. They were absolutely helpful, and if it wasn't for their guidance, I wouldn't be able to conduct the session at all. Thank you so much. And the next session is about London, so if anybody wants to join that, you can stay in this in-city suite itself. The other 2 sessions are upstairs. So yeah, I'm back to my volunteering mode. Anyway, thank you so much, and have a pleasant day.